I don't want to see any student or child feel like they don't have the avenue to find the help that they need. I think that oftentimes there is a lot of resources available, but we don't exactly know what they are.
Hello, and welcome to Disruptors at Work, an integrated care podcast. We're excited to discuss social media's role in teen mental health.
Hi, everyone. I am Varial Popo. I am the special host for today's episode. I am joined by Jessica Acid. She is an educational specialist, and she is here at one of the Campbell Union School Districts, one of the teachers at Fort RSP classroom. So today's guests have an extensive background and expertise in youth development and educational system, which sets the stage for our today's conversation. So let's get started. Can you share your background and experience working with adolescents?
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and talk about teen mental health and social media's role. I've been working with kids since I was a kid. I never stopped. I knew very early on that I wanted to continue into my career working with children. I started first with equine therapy, realized that working with children on the spectrum or children with learning disabilities was definitely a passion of mine, and I've just continued that ever since. I feel like working with children is probably one of the most valuable things I've done, and so I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today.
For you to be here. And you and I have worked together for the past 5 years, working really closely on a lot of these cases in terms of adolescent behavior. So I'm excited you're here with us. What role do you think schools and educators play in guiding students to use social media responsibly?
I think we play a vital role. I think that as people that are a part of their lives for at least 6.5 hours a day, whether it's 1 hour, 20 minutes, depending on your engagement or interaction, we have a responsibility to model what we think the appropriate behaviors are and what the appropriate access to these different things are. So I think we play a vital role in helping create a relationship that is positive, but also being on the lookout for the potential risk factors that come with it. It's a big responsibility, but I think we all play a part in it.
What are some of the risk factors that you've noticed in your classrooms? Because you and I talk a lot about like the importance of it. And just for everyone listening here, recently our school district, we went into this whole, we have pouches now and the students, they have to put their phones in those yonder pouches, which kind of takes away from checking their phone. But in the past, what are some of the risks that have you noticed while the kids were on their social media or in the classroom or school?
I've seen them do things like orchestrate meetings where they're on campus. And so they use it as sort of a way to huddle and isolate together. They use it, I love the communication aspect of it, but it's the secretive part of it. It's the setting up these not so positive decisions in the background that pull them away from the class. Like instead of listening to Edgar Allan Poe, they're looking at their lap, and you're like, why are we looking at our laps? Yeah. And then you see them become withdrawn. Like they're there, the lights are on, but nobody's home. And so it's sure they're present, but are they actually present with you? And I think some of the things that you've taught me to look out for are those things, like what I see from my students and my observations.
I think you play a really important role in the classroom because I know how observant you are and I know how attentive you are to all your students. What I have noticed in terms of the use of social media and technology at schools is that like there was a sense of like bullying that also occurs. And then I have noticed with our students that we've been working with where the depression and the hopelessness and the competitiveness, right, that happens amongst all these adolescents. I've
Mm.
noticed that too, and it's been prevalent that it's impacting our youth and our school system. So I'm excited to see how the younger pouches work this year for us.
I've enjoyed them. I've
You
enjoyed
have? Okay,
them. I
good.
have, yeah. I do love that they have put so many like problem solving skills into how to avoid the yonder pouches to the point where they're buying burners, they're putting calculators in there, or they're buying the things to unmagnetize the yonder pouches. And I just kind of look at them and I'm like, if you put even 1% of the problem solving effort and energy into school that you are putting into this yonder pouch, you'd be passing all your classes. And they kind of look at me like you're crazy. And I'm like, these are some high level things that you're doing just to get access to this so that you can do what? What do you want? What do you need so badly? Why are you so attached to this?
Yeah. Do you think that kids can succeed with having a balance with both, like being able to have access to obviously social media is it can negatively impact, hence why like a lot of these places you have to be 13 and over to register to sign up for it. Do you think that there it can if there's a balance, like a right balance of using social media and to be able to kind of put it away and do other things aside from social media, like it could actually empower students and they could be successful in the things they do?
I do think that I am a firm believer that technology is a tool and that social media can be a tool that we use as a resource when needed. Requires fact checking. It requires us being very responsible in our use. But I look at it sort of as the historical education system. You know, we started with the agrarian societies, and our education system was teaching life in agrarian history. And then we go into the industrial era and we shift for more factories. And it's like we're shifting right now. And we're seeing with these jobs being created that are strictly related to social media. And so it goes back to that responsibility, right? Like if we don't shift with our children and we don't give them those appropriate tools, how can we create that balance? I do think that there's the availability of a balance though.
Absolutely. I think it does offer a lot of educational information as well. I mean, I'm not on TikTok, so I don't know, but from sometimes I hear that there's a lot of information out there for people. Obviously, kiddos, they don't have the way to process or regulate things as we do as adults, but I agree with you. I think if it's used wisely, it can be successful. Um, what has been your journey in integrating teen mental health within school setting to address social media and depression? And on the record, I do want to emphasize that Jessica, Miss Acid, is probably one of my most favorite teachers I've ever worked with. I think someone that's been in this mental health field for so long. I've worked in a variety of different school districts, and that's where my entire 10 years or decade career has been. But working with Jess, Miss Acid here, where it has actually it has made me feel really empowered and really um, validated to have a teacher that actually sees students and sees like the barriers and sees their mental health, and she's like an advocate. She goes out of her way to make sure students are heard. She doesn't just see what the student presents, and she like actually does an assessment of what could be the main reason of why they're feeling that way. So I just really appreciate having her, having sort of like a connection with her, and she's like training our new future generation. So I'm really happy to have a teacher like that. So I guess I'm going to go back to the question I was going to say, but I just wanted people to know how you are. What has been your journey integrating mental health within school settings to address social media and depression?
Very early on, I knew that I needed to circle in my team. We all needed to be on the same page. Following the district mandates has been helpful. So our district does have some things in place to support it, like Common Sense Media. It's something we do monthly. And then the Yonder pouches, or in the past, we've had like cell phone jail, which was really fun, but it was also like, you know, it was torture for the kids because their cell phones would be on display in our rooms in these little clear jails. But the integration process for me has just been, I'm always going to start from the place of the whole child. I know that that person sitting in my seat or in the seat of any classroom, I can't reach them if they're not fully there. And so anytime I can integrate some way, a coping strategy, deep breathing, addressing time to put tech away, having those conversations with them about screen time, especially when it comes up in just an organic conversation with students where they talk to you about their life and they express like, oh, I was up all night playing, video games and talking to my friends on Snap. And it's like, well, when did you go to sleep? And so integrating yourself as a part of their life, involving yourself and knowing who your students are and building those relationships is always the base of where I start. And then pulling on my resources from my district and from my team members to make sure that we're communicating about what we're seeing with our kiddos. Because if we don't communicate, we don't know. And your lens is so vast from my lens that I go to you when I'm like, I'm stuck. I know that there's something going on, but I don't have the tools to identify or support it. I need your help. And thank goodness our district is so forthcoming and lets us have that opportunity to integrate mental health at all times.
I'm really thankful for that too, for able to have our team that we can work together on. You brought up a really good point. I wanted to kind of go back to that because you have said this to me before too, and I love that about how you can identify that. It's the sleep, right? The importance of sleep, lack of sleep, and then how much like these our kiddos, especially adolescents, like they are using a lot of their sleep time that should be sleeping in social media. And then there's an aspect of addiction, right? Like a social media addictive traits, right? Like you become actual addicted to social media where you're just scrolling. What is it called? Mindless scrolling.
Doom scrolling.
Doom scrolling. Doom scrolling. You're just scrolling.
Yep.
You don't know what you're absorbing. You're just scrolling.
2 hours later, like what happened in my life?
Where did it go? Now, the issue here is that I think sleep is very important in terms of depression, right? Like we've assessed that in order for us to be able to kind of wake up, to be able to have all the dopamine and all the SSRIs in our brain, like we need to have the shutdown in our brain to come back the next day to a classroom. Now, I've also noticed what you've identified in the past is like if you have a student that comes to your classroom that is super tired, you go out of your way to ask, like, when did you go to sleep? What were you doing before you went to sleep? How did you sleep? And I think you getting that information, you're absolutely right about that because that does impact mental health. And if we do an assessment of that, and if everyone's assessing, in terms of mental health, everyone's sleep patterns, I think we'll be able to get a lot of data and information working with our within our district, but within our community. But I do think that you do an amazing job with that. So thank you. What innovative approaches or best practices have you or others implemented in integrating teen or adolescent mental health into the classroom? And what results have you seen?
So I think the biggest thing our district has done is we continue to embed common sense media every month. And then I like to piggyback that off by doing a lot of goal setting with my students, usually at the beginning of the school year and every trimester. And then something I recently started this year was using the Children's Hope Survey. It's 5 questions, and it really asks about a student's ability to persevere and what their levels of hope are. And I like to temperature check them prior to a break and after a break, because it tells me and it gives me an idea of how much I can push them based on how confident and comfortable they feel about themselves in those moments. Mm-hmm. It's been really eye-opening because in years past, I've done very surface level, let's check in, give me a temperature check using emojis. And those are really great strategies and they're beneficial. And you should constantly be checking in with your kiddos that way. But I wanted to see about their ability to persevere, because their ability to persevere past things is so linked to their mental health. And some of our kiddos that are facing like the most trauma in their lives tend to have this perseverance that we don't even know the wealth and well of knowledge to. And so being able to see that in some of these students and know I can push you a little bit further, or I need to back off. I need to give you space to heal right now, and you're not in a place for me to push, and that's okay. And I think that's a big part of it too. I think as educators or as professionals that work with children and young adults, we need to be okay, just like we have to be okay with ourselves to say we've reached a point where enough is enough. We need a break, and that's okay. And I think sometimes we just forget that. And it's this constant need to pressure, move forward, move forward. But learning from you, I know that I can't push forward on everything because they're not ready for the next step. They're not even ready for the step that they're currently at.
How often do you administer the survey, and how do the kids respond to that?
So the
Like,
first time they did it, they were very like, "What are you asking us?" And so I had to sort of set them up for like the rationale, like this is something that used to be done a lot, and it's kind of like the Sonder that we use at our site. We do use another survey to check climate. How do you feel social emotionally? So we are checking that on a broader level with our school. But in my class, I like to do a little bit more like personal temperature checks. I try to do it at least 2 times a trimester, or I've noticed that before and after those big breaks, I see a lot of behaviors coming out in our kiddos. And I think the one that I see the most, especially, is that time right before Christmas, where it's not just seasonal depression, it's this, fear of missing out depression, because all these kids are going to be leaving the comfort of their school for almost 2 weeks to be at home, and that being pulled away, you can see like, oh, they're a little bit worried about it. But then their connection to their peers, the only thing they have then for a lot of them is their cell phone. And so they just dive into this pattern of doom scroll, doom scroll, doom scroll. And then the seasonal depression, and then other types of things are happening. So I try to really do the big holidays for sure, but the goal is 6 times a year.
Love that. I love that. And being able to gather this data, it's like a self-assessment, right? They're able to identify like in terms of how they're doing, how they're feeling, and then what do they want out of this.
Yep.
You bring up a really good point where I wanted to kind of take a moment about that. You're absolutely right in terms of the holidays. I think this whole cheerful phase that we're supposed to be in, right? Like we're supposed to be happy and cheerful and excited for the holidays. What we sometimes forget is that these exact holidays are huge triggers for a lot of people. It could be socioeconomic, it could be grief, it could be traumatic, it could be many things. So I think even you just bringing this up, another thought kind of goes into my head is that what would it be like for us to administer for you, our teachers or whomever, because this is great. Children's Hope Survey where we administer it when we start school right before the holidays, and then assess that and then post and then come up with a teamwork integrated system where we can all sit together and say, well, their scores are really low. Like, what is going on here and how can we make them feel better? And in terms of social media, and you and I have talked a lot about this, is sometimes some of the kiddos' hope. Like, this is the best friend they have. This is the family they have. Sometimes it's really tough being, in situations they are in. So being able to have this avenue also is helpful around the 2 weeks that they're off from us and don't get to see us. Yeah. But then it's really important when you do this, because then we get to actually see how impactful the social media was to their depression. Yeah. So I'm really glad to hear that. And I hope anybody that's listening, this could be a really great intervention.
Also known as the Children's Hope Scale. I call them both, but it's Children's Hope Scale. Yeah.
This is definitely something that I think a lot of us can use and utilize. Thank you for that. How do you think an integrated model, bringing together educators, mental health professionals, and parents, can help mitigate the negative impacts of social media on adolescent development while promoting healthier habits and emotional well-being?
Well, I think it says it in the way that you presented it. We're bringing everybody together. And if we're all together and we're all on the same page and we all have the same goal of supporting our children, it's going to benefit them the most, but it's also going to benefit us because we're going to have the tools and resources available to support them. We're not going to feel like I'm being presented with something that's unmanageable. And I think maybe that's the fear, is that mental health, sometimes you get nervous about it, and we have to stop being nervous about something that so many people are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. And so integration is just it's the path we have to go to.
I agree with you. I think
know what model.
I think one of the models that you and I are used to is the IEP model, which is where we always meet and where we
Yes.
integrate everyone's expertise and bring them in. And our team consists of behaviorists, speech pathologists, psychologists, therapists, RSP teachers, like gen ed teachers, administrators. So we do have a system in place for us that we kind of bring in different individuals within our meetings. But I do want to say something in terms of like bringing everyone together. The way I see it, it's almost like different lenses, right? Different data. And I know you and I have sat together with parents, and the way they see their children is so different versus how I see them or how you see them. So it's like
Hmm.
different lens. So maybe the integrated model that you're speaking of, where bringing everyone together and basically what we do in our IEP meetings, it's really a way for us to see what level of information each person has and kind of bringing that in and closing in that loophole. What's really happening? And from what I see in terms of mental health, a lot of times I do see differences in how that child is feeling emotionally and physically at home and at school. So it's quite different data that we're gathering. Um, do
When
you
I think
think
that
that?
that I think that
Go
like
ahead.
bridge that you're talking about between the community, the school, and the home,
Yeah.
it's really that is the bridge that we're all trying to build across to these gaps to create this integrated model that's not just for our students with IEPs and in that setting, but then moving it into a greater scale. And that's I think where we're all moving, and I feel like you've been a really big part of how that's supported at our site. I think that moving forward, as it becomes more common, it'll be easier, especially in California, to do these things. But I mean, the system has to be in place.
To be in place. And that's a really good point. Really, really good point. And if the system is not in place, then maybe we should look into how can we create that and how can we identify that. And everything and anything you and I have been discussing so far, it's been working for us, I think, of course. Of course, there's areas of growth, but what you're speaking of today is that are the things that's actually worked for us in establishing success in adolescents' minds with technology.
Yep.
Um, what future innovation and innovations do you envision in integrating adolescent mental health within education through a collaborative model involving other agencies?
I I want to see therapists, social workers, counselors. I want to see those services on a day-to-day basis everywhere on our campus, everywhere in our world. I don't want to see any student or child feel like they don't have the avenue to find the help that they need. I think that oftentimes there is a lot of resources available, but we don't exactly know what they are. And so we have to start being a little bit more transparent about what's available on campuses, what's available for staff, what's available for students. And then thinking about that, creating a system that flows gently down. I think that one of the things that you've done really well for us is you've supported a lot of our staff with professional development. I think the more we learn and the more we know, the better we can service our children. So continuing to give us those resources. And then for me, I would love to see more of that conscientious, thoughtful relationship building attached to mental health and attached to technology. We are connecting with our children, but we're not necessarily connecting with all the parts of their world. And technology is, for some of these kids, the center of their world. So figuring out a way for us to connect to that without it being a consequence for using it or worrying about those risks of getting into doom scrolling or falling into a depression because of the bullying that they're facing through the palm of their hand at any given moment. And then I feel that there needs to be more conscientious teaching of technology. We have this assumption that because they were born with it, they know how to use it, that they know how to use it better than we know how to use it. But in reality, they are lacking sufficient skills and understandings for the ramifications of the world that they are walking through every day on their cell phones. And it's an adult world that they have access to that we can't police it 24/7, and parents can't police it 24/7. So how do we support them in understanding that world and working in it?
Great points. Now, as you were speaking, my thoughts kept going to the new AI system that now we're going to have to integrate to with educators and as school-based or as agency-wide and, and practices, whatever. I envision and I hope for individuals that are working in this tech department or in working within the technology of some sort, is that if they're developing AI into more of like an integrated support for even our school system or agency-wide system. And I wonder if that'll be beneficial for like what you propose, where we teach these kids, we teach our youth how to navigate AI, what are the benefits of AI, and what are the consequences of AI? Because that is something that's also, this is an adult world, right? Like we have the filtration, like if you think the water filtration, we have that. Kids don't. So I think the innovations that you're proposing are really helpful, including with AI. And I hold individuals that are creating a lot of these systems in place to actually think of it in this way. How can we make it so that it's adolescent, child friendly? But another thought that went to my head while you were speaking as well is like maybe teaching the kids early on what technology is.
Yep.
Like how it can impact your mental health.
Yes, when we were kids, like when I was a child, it was we were taught how to use technology because it was brand new. Yeah. And it's we assume they know it, but they don't know it. And we've got to teach them. And then to your other point, it's about bringing it into the classroom in that moment and then having those real life experiences with it. And so we know they have the technology. Can we harness it? Can we use it as a tool?
That's a really great way to see it, because we're not necessarily saying we don't want it. What we're saying is, how can we modify this so that it could be for the benefit of our children and their mental health overall? I really appreciate that.
And then it leads to that point where like parents have this fear of not being able to connect with their child. And so we know that that's a barrier that we've been facing as a part of our trying to integrate the social media and mental health, is like, how do we appease the family? And so I foresee education as a really positive way of doing that. But then it like we've been saying, it's got to be systematic, and we all have to be on the same page to agree to what's going to work.
And it's got to be a system that works for most of us, and we're all doing the same thing, so we can gather the data, see if it's working or not. Yes. I think in terms of parents, even just being able to have what you and I discussed today, it is really important for us in terms of depression and in terms of social media. Like this can also support parents in terms of kind of figuring out what my child is going through, because I know the algorithm picks up. I know that, sometimes they're just geared towards what you're experiencing and feeling. And if a parent has a better knowledge of that and support of that, I think they might be able to also help their teenager.
And you bring up a great point, is that there's this algorithm out there that their children are interacting with that they don't have any interactions with. And it's literally picking up the things that our kiddos are saying, and it's leading them down paths that they might not understand those implications of those paths, or even that they're being led. They're being led.
They're being led. Absolutely. This is all computerized, and we understand, but we have to humanize it in some way so that our future generation of the kids that you and I are seeing are not going to be negatively impacted. It has been so great speaking with you, Jess. You are an amazing human being, an amazing educator. You are incredibly compassionate, and I am privileged to know you, and I'm privileged to have worked with you, and will continue to work with you.
Thank you.
On that note, I want to say a big thank you to our incredible guest, Miss Jessica Acid, for sharing their insights and expertise today.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share. Let's keep disrupting healthcare together. Until next time.